Announcements by the Speaker. Papers.
The Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I have the honor to lay the following papers. Paper number 1, the report of Auditor General of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Environmental Management Authority, Environmental Trust Fund for the year ended September 30th, 2019. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that paper number 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Honourable members, the question is that paper number 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee. All in favour say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Minister of National Security.
Speaker, I have the honour to lay the annual report of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board for the period October 1st, 2017 to September 30th, 2018.
The Minister of Sport and Community Development.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the administrative report of the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts for the fiscal year October 2018 to September 2019.
Public business, government business, bills second reading.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2021 be now read a second time. The Leader of the Opposition has the equivalent time to the Minister of Finance, which is 3 hours.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to contribute in the debate on the Appropriations Bill 2020 for fiscal 21. I want to thank my colleagues on this side of the House for their overwhelming support and confidence reposed in me to lead what I now think is one of the most powerful opposition benches in the Caribbean. Whilst some opposition parties have been wiped out during national elections under COVID measures, here in Trinidad and Tobago, we increased our parliamentary seats and we received a popular vote in Trinidad. No easy achievement. Thanks to all. The democratic disaster being what it is, we soldier on to hold the government accountable as a loyal opposition of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Today, the government has a wafer-thin majority, resting nervously on the edge of a precipice. They are as stable as jello. We are confident that the weight of incompetence and corruption may well nudge them off that metaphorical cliff. We will triumph regardless of how long and hard the road may be. Ours is a sacred duty to compel by lawful means the government to be accountable and transparent. As I survey the horizon on this day, I reflect that we are in 2020. A former PNM administration, which carried several of the frontbench members we see here today, including the Prime Minister, did promise us that in 2020, our nation would be a developed country. Well, if this is a developed country, we don't want to see an underdeveloped state. In preparing for my presentation today, I reflected on my own journey and mission. When I had the honor to lead the government in 2010, I indicated that I was driven to take steps to immediately protect our children via the Children's Life Fund. Indeed, Cabinet Note number 1 of 2010 was to establish that Children's Life Fund. Later, I was moved to introduce a milk grant when we saw a mother resorting to stealing milk at a grocery to nourish her baby. Today, I'm more committed to protecting the poor when I saw a recent headline titled, "Bandits Apologize for Robbery," says he was trying to feed his family. While citizens must be punished for transgressions, one cannot help but feel empathy for those who are driven to law-breaking to find food. A woman was forced to stand outside a gas station with a placard this very week. And that placard read, "Good day, please help us help a child to eat." When we contrast this with the obscene headline on yesterday's newspaper, "Gas Brains," where we learned that a few cabinet ministers ate up about $7 million in exemptions on luxury cars, we must conclude the suffering is real, the pain is real, and the rage is real. Today, I want to indicate that the members of the opposition benches are willing to work with government for us to revisit the exemptions on motor vehicles with respect to putting a cap and or otherwise with respect to the number of times that such exemptions can be given. In 2020, the year of developed country status, communities are crying out for water in their taps or complain of too much water when it floods. It seems to flood when the clouds just set up, when it just gets dark. We find protests in the villages for better roads and infrastructure. Children marching demanding government complete construction of their schools. Is this the long sought after goal of developed country status? Today the minister talks glibly about the digital economy, while 65,000 students are without IT devices after that government shamelessly rejected the policy of laptops for children. Belatedly and sheepishly, they come now to offer IT devices, but that after a means test, which can take years or months, at least a year, to implement. So give us some targets, give us some benchmarks as to when it is that you hope to achieve this promise that you're making. On Monday last, the Minister of Finance rhapsodized about his e-governance ecosystem. This 2 months after a taxi driver purchased a $500 typewriter for the licensing division so he could get his taxi badge quickly. He did get the badge after donating a typewriter uncannily called Smith Corona. They talk digital, but they behave analog and mechanical. They have returned to the tired tactic of blame Kamla, blame the UNC. I warned the government that this strategy had a sell-by date, and that date has completely expired now. As we meet today, there is no sector that has been a standout area for performance by this government and in its incarnation as the previous government. In fact, they have normed incompetence and inefficiency. Correspondingly, no minister has ever emerged as a high-performing administrator. In several ministries, they change ministers between Friday and Sunday. Delivery has been their Achilles heel. There is a deficit of implementation and a deficit of delivery. But they are not short on talk, but they're very short on the walk. After 5 years, they are still constructing a walkover. And we still expect foolishly for them to build highways and waterfronts and ferries and ports and so on. The minister last Monday began his 3-hour-long tirade at about 2:34 p.m. Remarkably, it just took him 90 minutes about to arrive at the very crucial issue of crime and security. Little comfort for many citizens plagued by crime in all its most heinous forms. Just yesterday, senior police officers were urging the population to take preventive measures following an increase in home invasions over the past few months. Within 48 hours this very week, 3 home invasions have been reported in South Trinidad. In one case, an 87-year-old retired medical doctor was confronted by armed bandits at 3 a.m. in the morning at his home. However, the minister, like Whip Van Winkle, has not yet awoken to this grim reality which citizens face on a daily basis. There is neither empathy nor urgency from government. But then, for the Prime Minister, hell hath no fury like a peacock stolen. The commander of the elite hierarchy of the police service to hunt down those miscreants responsible for stealing the Prime Minister's peacock, dead or alive. Later, I would go into a little more detail to expose incompetence and hypocrisy as it relates to security. When I speak about empathy and sacrifice, I do so with moral authority. When I led my partnership team into a new government and established, as I said, the historic Children's Life Fund, we led by example. I gave 10% of my monthly pay as Prime Minister to put in that fund. My ministers followed by contributing 5% of their salary to this fund for all 5 years. That is what leadership by example is about. It was in solidarity with the poor and a response to suffering. And so I think in these pandemic times, another great moment of moral leadership has arrived. And so I call on this government to consider a 5% pay cut in solidarity with suffering citizens. Follow the growing examples of countries like New Zealand, India, Singapore, where top politicians have taken pay cuts in solidarity with the poor. While such a move will not necessarily shift the overall fiscal position, it is about leadership by example. We can call it a policy of coronavirus solidarity. We can show that we are riding out these difficult times with the people. While I expect a collective moan and groan from colleagues opposite, they may even consider it as a short-term initiative in the short term for about 12 months as the burst of the pandemic, harshest circumstances are being experienced by our population. These funds can go towards a special cooked food supply program for citizens deemed to be in extreme need, as the lady with the placard I described earlier. From our side, we did it already to save lives of children in the period 2010-2015. We stand prepared to participate in a collective effort if government can find the heart and the will to do so. But with or without them, I have instructed my members of parliament to take steps to increase our assistance to the poor and suffering at this very difficult time. I turn now to the actual budget presentation of the Honourable Minister of Finance. Incredible as it seems, the Minister has managed once more to deceive the vast majority of Trinidadians. The budget ends so bad, people have been saying, unmindful it appears of the spectacular rise in the cost of living, of unprecedented retrenchment, and bankruptcies of declining company profits. The fact is, the budget lacks the wit, sagacity, and hope one would expect in these desperate times, and is little more than a shopkeeper's list of impending price increases. These words aptly describe our current situation in this year's budget, but they are not my words. They're the words of the late, well-respected journalist O.N. Batiste in a newspaper column published on Sunday, January 25, 1985. But the words could have easily been written after Monday's presentation. This is where this government has taken our nation. We are an economy in retreat. There was once Vision 2020, but under the member for Diego Martin West and the member for Diego Martin Northeast, we now have Vision 1985. We have gone backwards. The column from 35 years ago paints a picture of life back then under a different P&M regime, which is strikingly similar to what we see today under yet another PNM regime. Trinidad and Tobago seems to be living in a perpetual time loop, where one generation of Trinbagonians must pay for the incompetence of a PNM administration. Our task as the opposition is to hold the government accountable to the great people of our nation. In this budget debate, we will show how this administration continues to fail the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The Minister of Finance named his budget resetting the economy, but it should be called what it is, business as usual, as seen over the last 5 years. It is shocking how much the budget of this budget is simply a rehash of old policies and old ideas, same old, same old. There is nothing new, nothing innovative. There is no vision to take us into the economy of the 21st century. The budget was outdated before the ink had dried, after it was printed. And of course, it has all been covered with a cloak of deception. They came with misinformation, conflicting figures, a convoluted narrative intended to hide the true reality of our situation. As expected, the minister's almost 3-hour presentation focused heavily on COVID-19. They did not account to the people for the 5 years of economic mismanagement. Instead, now, changing their mantra to blame COVID. They are so utterly clueless that they complain and bemoan the pandemic and its effects, rather than seeing that there is opportunity in this crisis. Now is the time for refocusing priorities and developing policies and programs to help people. There was not a single initiative to do this. In fact, I think this budget was very anti-people. You did nothing for 5 years. Spent close to $300 billion with very little to show for it. Let's look at COVID. I urged the government over and over to test more, to tell the nation the truth of what we were dealing with. The truth is now being revealed. Before elections, low testing, low numbers, a story of handling COVID well. After elections, increased testing, increased numbers, and in true PNM gaslighting form, they still want to say they handled COVID well. There are 3 doctors on my bench, and they will go into more depth and details about the handling of the COVID and their own suggestions as we go forward. But it is ridiculous and unacceptable that an administration which refused to test more than 5% of the population before the elections could continue to say they acted on the data. What data was that? What data did they act on? It is shameful that countless persons have had their surgeries and treatment postponed. Yet this administration still boasts of a functioning parallel healthcare system. And some have even died whilst awaiting treatment. It is unconscionable that any of them can get up and boast of a healthcare system that we all know has failed our citizens. And this was long before COVID. They pass the buck continually to our first responders and medical professionals. And something fails, it is always someone else who must take the blame. But if it goes right, then you see them lining up all to take credit. But history would show this government dealt with COVID in a manner to fit their own narrow agenda and not in the best interest of the people of TNT. They have tried to use the cover of COVID as their own antidote against any criticism and responsibility. And how did we get here? There's only one role which every government must perform, and that role is to serve the employers. And the employers are the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Right now, outside these walls, outside the bubble that this government lives in, thousands of our fellow countrymen and women are facing a bleak future. Many have lost their jobs, are struggling to find work. On Monday, I said Trinidad and Tobago is facing a twindemic. One is COVID-19, and the other virus is far more dangerous and has been with us for 5 years now. It started with short-sightedness and incompetence that led to the closure of the Petrotrin refinery, the destruction of our oil-producing sector, the placing of close to 10,000 people and their families on the breadline. It started with the failure to implement proper policies to secure our borders, allowing for the influx of drugs and guns, and so escalating our crime rate. It started with the arrogance that made a politician with no experience in the energy sector think that he could personally negotiate gas deals, causing the collapse of the entire Point Lisa's industrial estate and the loss of thousands of jobs. It started with the hubris of an engineer who, after 5 years, has crafted zero policies to drive economic growth, attract foreign direct investment, and address the forex issue crisis or deal with rising poverty. It started with the blatant corruption that wrecked the inter-Ireland Sea Bridge, destroying the Tobago economy, and then trying to blame everything under the sun other than themselves. Today, Trinidad and Tobago has failed and is falling in almost every index measuring process. And one way we can look at the state of our economy, the health of our economy, and be able to see that before COVID, this government put the economy in intensive care. They crushed the economy before COVID. So an examination of our macroeconomic environment reveals that our government has put our economy in intensive care before COVID. Let's look at some of these indices, the macro indicators. I will start with labor because this has to do with jobs. And that is where we are in a job crisis. COVID did not crush the labor market. This PNM government crushed the labor market long before COVID. In fact, when the virus arrived on our shores, as I said, the economy was already in intensive care. With the PNM in office in March 2020, when the virus arrived, it was sadly a disaster meeting a disaster. So let's look at employment. This government has consistently been hiding the statistics relating to employment. Some comes out, some doesn't come. So let's look at what we have. We have the reports, the annual reports of the NIBTT. And that report tells us that in June 2015, which would have been just before, these reports are done with data up to June in any calendar year, that up to June 2015, there were 516,926 persons on the list of insured contributors. That is to say, meaning that they're employed and they're paying NIB dues. That number, when we come to June 2018, fell to 452,234. What this means is that in that period from June 2015 to June 2018, 64,692 persons were no longer employed. In other words, before COVID, 64,000 people, 692, had lost their jobs. And these are only for registered contributors to the scheme. There will be those who would be outside of the formal NIB insurance scheme. So the number will be much greater. All of this, all these people lost their jobs under this government before anyone got a COVID fever in the country. This number does not include all the job losses for the rest of 2018, all of 2019, and up to March 2020, which is up to just before COVID. COVID lockdowns in March. The government has not provided any statistics for this period. And even though the NIB on its website, quite a while now, has been saying they have completed the 2019 NIB report, they said they will not post it on the website until it is laid in Parliament, as the government has to do. So they've sent it to the minister, but the minister has failed to lay it in Parliament. And I say this is another attempt to hide the true statistics of unemployment. Anecdotal evidence, however, as carried in newspapers, in the media, whether print or electronic, suggests that an additional number of persons have lost their jobs. So you will get, for example, up to June 2018 that we have the numbers for, thereafter they shut down Better Trend, with thousands of more workers going home You had many other companies shutting down with workers going home, and it's all there in the carried anecdotally in the media. So it suggests that by the end of 2019, about 100,000 persons had lost their jobs under this government. Over 100,000 persons. And to this debacle, we now face the possible retrenchment, job losses at WASA, at TNTech, used car industry, National Petroleum, and the port, and many others. So the numbers are expected to increase. Interestingly, just yesterday, as reported in the, I think it was from the morning edition program on CNC3, Dr. Patrick Antoine of the hospitality industry said that over 100,000 persons in that hospitality industry are now unemployed. So we're looking at pre-COVID, thousands of persons losing their job, nothing to do with COVID. And then we come within the COVID times, we are seeing thousands again. And then we are seeing the projections for more to lose their jobs. Imagine over 100,000 persons left without a source of income. Imagine their family members. How saddening and how heartbreaking. It unfortunately does not stop this industry only. You have to consider the tens of thousands sent home before COVID-19. Unemployment was a pre-COVID issue and now is exacerbated by COVID. The government couldn't deal with that unemployment issue before COVID. So I don't expect and believe that they can deal with that employment situation now as we go into 2021. We see no clear skies on the horizon. Any light at the end of the tunnel is really a train coming towards us in our direction. What was a bright plan of this Minister of Finance? And guess what? He astonishingly gave a tax break to persons who are unemployed. The tens of thousands who are not earning a salary got the good news that if they had $7,000 a month, that would be tax-free. The savage attack on labor was predicted. As I said, the privatization report and NP and others, more job losses. And then we get all the grants being given. Again, my colleagues who are shadowing the Social Development Ministry portfolio will give them more details. But each day you read horror stories of people who are saying they have not got any of the grants. They have applied salary grants, rental grants. They have not got them. But yet billions have been spent. And persons are saying they have not got it. You hear the horror stories of the pressure that they go through in order to put in the application and to be told they lost the application. So something has to be done there. So maybe we can suggest, because you may have good intentions and want to help people. It's often said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And maybe you may want to consider empowering the local government authorities to assist in the distribution of the assistance and the help to citizens of the country, because clearly centralizing it up in the Ministry of Social Development and the Ministry of Finance is not reaching the people who are most in need. It is not helping. The Minister, in the meantime, while sitting upright at the wheel of his Mustang and luxury Benz, may not be aware that ordinary low-income workers in elementary occupations, particularly single mothers, they buy low-cost used cars to take their children to school and to drive to and from work. They can't afford the $1 million plus Porsche Cayenne, if that's the proper thing, and the Mercedes Maybach, favored by some ministers. The Prime Minister can declare cars are not critical because he has a fleet of vehicles at his command, so cars are not critical. But for the ordinary person, a car is vital to them functioning, especially now in the COVID time, especially now. The cost of a used car is expected to increase by 40%. Those low-income workers who depend on a Toyota Aqua or Nissan AD wagon will feel the pinch as the Porsche boys continue to ride high. Low-income persons earning $5,500 can get a loan today and afford a car valued at $65,000. When the minister's measure kicks in, that same worker will not be able to afford the cheapest car. There are thousands of persons in addition employed in the sector. Think of people like mechanics, workers in body and detailing shops, drivers, office staff. Many of them will be out of a job courtesy to the Minister of Finance with this measure. Imagine small operators with a yearly quota of 15 cars will now have that quota reduced by 30%. Economies of scale will wipe out many of these small firms. The big players with a 400 quota, they will survive. The big ones always do. Not so the small and medium-sized firms. The minister boasts about helping small and medium-sized enterprises while presiding over their demise in this used car sector. This is a deceit we speak about today. This is what you say, but this is not so bad, not so bad. But the devil is in the details and the impact it will have on the poor, the vulnerable, the working poor, the middle classes of this country. And therefore, we ask the minister to reconsider this measure. If it is that you want to impose this, you said because of traffic, but I ask you to think of the low-income persons and even middle-income persons who use this for their children, for themselves, for their families, that you may want to consider the quota that you set. So instead of going at a 30% the quota, that you may want to consider something smaller than that. And give these people, again, in a very harsh time with jobs being so scarce, an opportunity to survive and feed their families. And this will happen. The price at the same time of fuel will go up. The cost of the car goes up. And we will expect high productivity and low cost for transportation, construction, and services budget. In my respectful view, spells pressure, pressure, and more pressure on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to speak a little on the new domain of work and family life. It is an area that we need to take account of. We cannot continue business as usual with the same kind of models. It's a whole different world. I'm speaking of plexi box here. Who would have thought that in the parliament, the seat of our democracy, that MPs would be distancing, only limited numbers will be coming out, and speaking in a plexi box. Well, I'm glad for it because at least we can remove the mask. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for this provision, because it's very difficult to speak. You already hyperventilate when you're speaking, and with the mask, it was really uncomfortable. So thanks to the Parliament and to Madam Speaker for allowing us this opportunity to address the Parliament and, of course, the public. So, new domain of work and family life. In a matter of months, the landscape of work and family has been altered fundamentally. Fundamentally. How we see work and where we do it have become a key focus of policymakers across the globe. Remote working has now become the order of the day. The renewed growth of this phenomenon now presents significant policy challenges, which this government, true to form, will take another 5 years if they have so much to understand. This process appears to be irreversible, as traditional workplaces are portrayed as dysfunctional and unhealthy. So that's why we have to hide our faces, we have to speak in a plexi box, we have to social distance and all the other health protocols, because workplaces are now seen as dysfunctional and unhealthy. As we are bunkered down in our homes, therefore, many people are working remote from home. As we work from confined spaces, we find that workspace and leisure space is one and the same. This is the new norm. As employers look for greater efficiency and productivity gains, there is a greater potential to exploit workers and deny well-established benefits and statutorily protected entitlements. A new form of labor inspection machinery is needed to supervise the advent of working from home. I repeat, government should give some attention to providing a new form of labor inspection machinery, whether through legislation or otherwise, to properly supervise the advent of working from home. Another factor is the isolation and loneliness. That has been flagged as psychological variables, demanding greater employee assistance strategies and counseling service. Has government given any attention to this? Female employees who stay at home find that they must weave their days as remote workers for their employer, but they must also tutor for online education their children, and still undertake everyday household work. They balance full-time childcare with part-time teaching, lesson planning, online learning. Single mothers are today bearing this burden in the pandemic. Many must work through the chaos while keeping a balance. Today, I salute the mothers who now work on an average 15 hours more per week to ensure that their children reap the benefits of stay-home education whilst undertaking their own careers and professional tasks. Let us salute the mothers who are doing this extra work. In a May 2020 survey of parents in the US, UK, France, Germany, and Italy by the Boston Consulting Group, families reported an additional 27 hours spent each week on household work, childcare, and education. That is nearly like a second job, equivalent to a second job. Such is the stress and strain for parents, and particularly single mothers. I suggest and recommend that government must have dialogue with employers to ensure that parents receive reasonable time off once per week, at least, to collect assignments for their children from the school. A single mother working reported she was threatened with being fired because she took time to go to a primary school to receive her child's hard copy of assignments. This in the context where children have no IT devices and online learning is not available. There are policy challenges we face. Homeschooling will be here for the foreseeable future. There will be no stampede to get children back in schools even when the doors reopen. We took note that government has not paid attention to these issues. Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes or the inclinations or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence, as John Adams once said. It is clear that the facts and evidence show an incapable, apathetic, and indifferent administration with regard to the humanity of the citizenry of our country. It is like déjà vu. Every year and nothing new. Unemployment and layoffs have become the norm under this government. And even when the present Prime Minister was Minister of Agriculture, disaster tyranny that led to its untimely demise in 2003 was under his purview. 17 years later, his same khaki pants, he was the Prime Minister that closed Petrotrin, destroying a century-old legacy. Today, less than 2 months into his second term as Prime Minister, hundreds of thousands more are marked to lose jobs in the manufacturing, beverage, entertainment, foreign use, vehicle industries, and others. Whilst that is happening, what is most disheartening is the government's continued lip service to the poor and vulnerable in society. I want to remind you that it was the same PNM which boasted that he had slashed the social safety net and that they had saved millions by reducing the number of meals for poor children in schools and the number of people who got food cards. Tell us what is the actual number of individuals who have received the support, because every day, people come to my office, people text, people send emails and so on, saying that they're in desperate need of support. Many have become impoverished and some are in absolute poverty. Have you ever heard of a man boasting of his incompetence? The same ministry, the same system, the same time and effort that would have collated the information and processed these individuals to collect the 1,500 food support grant should have processed their pending applications. The system that was being audited and made more efficient, as the minister reported in the 2017 budget speech, has failed our most vulnerable. I challenge the minister to tell us how many individual children have benefited under this program and for what period. Do these grants cover all 79,000 students for the almost 200 days they've been without access to school feeding? If not, what has happened to all of the rest? The minister has declared he has spent over $4 billion already of the $6 billion he determined will be needed through the pandemic. This was spent on the social safety net exclusively and was in addition to expenditure previously budgeted. I am absolutely committed to ensuring that the vulnerable are protected I recall a minister stating that persons receiving funds from the government to assist in providing support will be accountable to God. I would like to remind members opposite that they are accountable to the people of this nation. As such, I call for a complete and forensic investigation into the expenditure of this $6 billion. I am not convinced that the provision of these grants is being done equitably and with transparency. And whilst COVID has taken center stage, the government Social Sector Investment Program 2021 is characterized by the multiplicity of projects abandoned or underfunded by this government. Several programs, they've abandoned the Development Center for Persons with Challenges. They've abandoned the plan to refurbish and reconfigure Dretchi and other homes for older persons. They underfunded the establishment of social displacement centers, refurbishment of the Community Education Training, Information and Resource Center, and much more. As I saw a shadow social development MP will talk more of that. So I talked of macro indicators which show that before COVID, this government had put the economy into intensive care. I want to speak now about GDP numbers, which tell us about the state of the health of the economy. The Minister of Finance, in his spotlight presentation, introduced a graph to show real growth rate of the GDP in Trinidad and Tobago. As a reference, however, that very graph also shows that when my government inherited the economy, that economy had tanked, contracting by almost 5% in fiscal 2009 and had struggled with the lagged effects of the global financial crisis in the previous year. So we didn't come. We didn't come to the population with doom and gloom and blame game. We did what we do best. We set about putting the country back to work, and we succeeded. We succeeded. We were able to grow the economy from $141.2 billion at current market prices in fiscal 2010. We grew that to when we left in 2015 to $159.2 billion. In fact, according to central bank stats, in fiscal 2015, even with Brent falling to as low as US 36.11 US dollars per barrel, we were able to grow the economy by 1.5% in our last year. At a per capita level, our gross national income was at its highest level in our history. Our GNI was at the highest level in our history. At US 1.30 per person, $19 per person according to World Bank figures. Under the PNM, well before COVID, income per person dropped to US $16.8 in 2019 per person, which means each man, woman and child on average lost $20,000 in income under the PNM before COVID. The minister has been making the wrong preaching that the economy was on a growth path, that the economy had stabilized, that the economy had turned around, that he was seeing clearly and the rain is gone. All the song and dance in each budget, they were not a true reflection of what was happening with the economy. With each year, the economy, the GDP continued to fall, and it was simply not true that the optimistic outlook that the minister was feeding the population was totally erroneous. During the first year of this minister, the economy dived. It contracted by minus 5.6%, marking the start of the recession under this PNM government. Despite boasting for years about stability, turnaround, growth, the evidence is clear that the economy of TNT contracted in 2016, contracted in 2017, had virtually no growth in 2018, contracted in 2019, and there was no COVID in Trinidad and Tobago. None. If that is what is happening before COVID, then we have no hope that they can restore this nation, revive this nation during COVID or after. Fall in credit ratings. Standard & Poor's continues to downgrade TNT from a grade A in December 2015 to BBB plus with stable outlook 2017 to BBB plus negative outlook 2018 to BBB in July 2019 and BBB minus in March 2020, all before COVID. Moody's Investor Services has consistently downgraded the country under this government. After 5 years of mishandling the economy and misleading the population, the incompetence of this Minister of Finance is finally evident in his very flippant confession for the first time, and I quote, "Generally, we have not been too well economically speaking for the last several years." The minister's own words, "Generally, we have not been doing too well economically speaking for the last several years." This is what the Spotlight held recently at the Spotlight. First time admitting, every time coming to this Parliament in budget statement after budget statement, speaking about stability and growth and turnaround, all totally untruths to the population. Having used the blame Kamla rhetoric for 5 years, government has now adopted blame COVID as a mask for the incompetence. I say again, COVID did not destroy the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. The PNM destroyed the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. When we look at government revenue, the picture is the same. The Minister of Finance came to tell the country government revenue has fallen. Hard times are upon us. No surprise. That has been the same song and dance in every budget statement. So while he was standing there wringing his hands in a fake despair, I say he must take full responsibility for the collapse in government revenue during his tenure. Take responsibility. Let's put it in perspective. I told you what we had inherited when we came in office in 2010. But during the period 2010 to 2015, we grew government revenue from 43.9 billion in fiscal 2010 to 58.4 billion in 2014. We fell slightly in 2015 because of the drop in prices to 57.3 billion in that fiscal year. More than that, we were able to increase revenues from VAT from 6 billion to 7.2 billion, and we did that in spite of the fact that we took off VAT on over 7,000 items. We were able to grow that revenue from I have told you before, we grew total non-tax revenue from 6.5 billion in 10 to 9.96 billion in 2015, a growth of 53%. Overall, we were able to grow our revenue base by 39% in about 5 years because I say we did what we did best. We put the country back to work. Central government revenues from taxes dropped by a whopping 20% over the period fiscal 2015 to fiscal 2019, with most of that drop coming from a loss of central government tax take on incomes. And all this fall in revenue, despite an unexpected windfall in 2.4 billion that they got from a tax amnesty. Over the same period, central government revenue from taxes on goods and services dropped. In spite of all these new taxes that the minister was piling on, the revenue from taxes on goods and services dropped from 9.3 billion to 7.8 billion, 15%, even with the new online tax, the VAT put in VAT on items that were before zero rated when we were there. So when you compare fiscal 2015, or last year in office, to fiscal 2019, no COVID, we see that the revenue has fallen. Reported by the central bank, revenue has fallen. Even as they broadened the tax base, as I said, they were not able to collect that revenue from taxes. There is no mystery or mischief query here. This is simply mismanagement and incompetence on the part of that government. One of the most important indicators of economic health is debt. Well, this government has incurred more debt than any previous administration in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And that debt was accrued before COVID. Don't let them fool you. Before COVID. They were intent on borrowing and borrowing and borrowing in order to satisfy their vanity projects and so on. When we left office, net public sector debt to GDP was at 47.1%. They came into office with their runaway borrowing, and we see net public sector debt to GDP ratio a whopping 62.2% at the end of fiscal 18-19 again, all before COVID. All before COVID. They crashed the economy before COVID. When we talk about levels of debt, I want to just raise a point because every budget debate, somebody on the other side raises this. Every debate comes with things that are totally untrue. They said we were running on fumes with respect to the overdraft. Running on fumes with respect to the overdraft. And that we had maxed out the overdraft. Well, let's look at the figures. The only minister and government which maxed the overdraft over the legal limit is this Minister of Finance. This Minister of Finance. We left the overdraft on the exchequer account to 33 billion in 2015. When we demitted office, it was 41 billion. That was September 2019, pre-COVID-19. Each consecutive year, they maxed out the overdraft. And what the minister always does, he comes to this parliament and those books that brings the estimates. The books tell us about interest payment on the overdraft. But what the minister does is every year he estimates it with $250,000. The interest payment on the overdraft would be I don't know, like that's a magic figure. Because each year, 2019, he estimated interest on the overdraft at $250 million. In other years, the same thing. And in 2021, he's doing it again. Interest on the overdraft, $250 million. But then when we get the actual numbers, what's happening? The interest is over $1 billion. Over $1 billion. So he underestimates or misestimates, and one would think that he's doing that deliberately. Doing it deliberately, thinking nobody will go back to check. So what's the magic in $250 million, which ends up that the interest being paid is over $1 billion. In 2019, the estimate of the interest on overdraft was $250 million. The actual expenditure is $1.2 billion. That is a pattern. So let's talk about maxing out this overdraft. Minister, there's a formula, you know. There's a formula. It was 15% of revenue in any fiscal year. You're allowed to take that as an overdraft, month to month, as the case may be. But this minister has done two things. The minister came to the parliament and increased the limit on the overdraft. So, from 15% to 20%. So he could now overdraft more. Let's look at the figures. In 2016, the limit on the overdraft, the legal limit, estimated by using the percentage of 15% out of the revenue numbers, the legal limit was $7 billion, just over. Do you know what the minister did in that year? 2016-17, fiscal 17. The minister took from the overdraft $10.5 billion. I'm not making these numbers. If you don't believe me, ask the Auditor General. These come out of the Auditor General's reports, each year, the annual reports. Ask the Auditor General. 2017, 2018 fiscal. The maximum for that overdraft was $8.9 billion using the legal formula. Do you know what that minister did? He maxed out the overdraft above that legal limit, taking $13.6 billion from $8.9 billion. Max the overdraft above the legal limit. Don't ask me, as I say, if you don't believe me, check the Auditor General. Check the Auditor General report. And if you want the page number, I'll give it to you. For the 17 to 18, for the 16-17, you could go to look at page 149 of the Auditor General's report for that year. For the 17-18, you could go to the Auditor General's report, page 109 for that year. Come now, fast forward, 2018-2019 fiscal. The maximum, legally, using the formula set in the law, was 9.3 billion, just about that. Do you know what the minister did? The minister maxed it above that legal limit to $13.3 billion. $13.3 billion. Go to page 133 of the Auditor General's report for that fiscal year. We do not yet have the numbers for 2019-2020, the fiscal year that has just ended, because we only get these, we don't get it from the government. We only get it when the Auditor General publishes that report, and that report wouldn't come until next year, April. But I have no doubt that the minister maxed it out over the legal limit. Let's look at the deficit. The Minister of Finance over the past 5 years, starting from his first budget speech, has repeatedly chided my government for running budget deficits. He continued this in his most recent spotlight, ignoring the facts facing him in the very graph that he had presented. So, in his 5-year term, this government ran a whopping $48 billion in deficits over the 5-year period, an average of $9.6 billion per year. Even remove the effect of COVID on the deficit, remove 2020 altogether, go back to pre-COVID, the average deficit for the 4-year period before was $7.3 billion per year, higher than any and every deficit during my tenure. The new deadline has also passed, and given the budgeted deficit of over $5 billion in 2020, it is safe to say that the minister never expected to balance any budget this year, COVID or no COVID. The fallacy of balanced budget is laid bare. It was never intended. And I want to remind you, Mr. Minister, in your own graph, whilst you say that in the last year we were in office that we had a deficit of over $7 billion, the true figure is $2.7 billion. But in your very next year, it was minus $7.9 billion. That's what the $7 billion is. That's what you did in your first fiscal year, first budget. And it continued to increase. 2017, $13.5 billion. This year, I think it was $16 billion was the deficit, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, you had extraordinary COVID, but the point is that you've been running budget deficit in almost every fiscal year before COVID. Remember, before COVID, you put the economy in intensive care. Heritage and Stabilization Fund. I think today the country should be very grateful that we had the fiscal space in this pandemic time because of the government I led, which put all that money in this Heritage and Civilized Fund. It's a sovereign wealth fund, but a sovereign wealth fund established first by the Pandey government. It was then known as the Interim Heritage and Interim Civilization Fund. Thereafter, the legislation was passed. Took the PNM government coming into office several years before they actually they actually brought the legislation, so we would have lost all those years of monies that could have gone into the fund. I met, when I came into office, a net asset value of a little over $3 billion US, to be exact, in the HSF. Over my tenure, we grew the fund to over $5.7 billion US. We always put deposits into the fund, and not once did we withdraw or make any withdrawal out of that HSF. Not once. Not once. What that meant, we increased what is known as the net asset value, the NAV, of over $2.7 billion US. That was almost a 100-fold increase. In other words, we doubled the savings in the fund under my tenure. So when you talk about, you come and talk about we raided Treasury and running on fumes, nothing is further from the truth. Statistics, these do not lie. You have an HSF report that comes out, being put out all the time. There's a committee, a chairman of the board putting out these reports and so on. And the numbers are there. I have the pages if you want me to tell you what they are. But we never withdrew. And with credit to Mr. Patrick Manning, even when there was a former Prime Minister, late Patrick Manning, even when there was a problem in the 2008-9 period, that Prime Minister did not withdraw from the HSF. Did not. It took this government, even before COVID, to withdraw from the HSF. Even before COVID. So, they have withdrawn about $1.6 billion US dollars. $1.6 billion. That is 10.9 billion TT dollars. Where had money gone? Can we see schools? Can we see any development, roads, schools, and so on? Where has that $10.9 billion gone? The Minister of Finance continues to rush everything, even rushing our foreign reserves levels. This is dangerous and unsustainable. They have borrowed, I think, in this fiscal alone, COVID times, they've borrowed, I think, 3 times. 3 times to the tune of about 900,000 US dollars. And before that, before COVID, they borrowed twice. Not borrowed, they drew down, they raided. They took out of the HSF. The minister stated when they came to office, they met the HSF with 5.5 billion. It was really 5.6 billion. And to date, it has 5.8 billion. So the statements he made is that, they are ridiculous and unfounded. They're very disingenuous statements. To say, well, look, we pull out all that money, but it's the same. Minister, if you didn't pull it out, it would have been more in the HSF fund. It would have been more. It would have been more. But that is how it is. It's like anyhow, you just need more and more, very voracious appetite. So that's with the HSF, and there's a dangerous thing happening with the HSF with these withdrawals. Because it seems as though the government is using HSF, the foreign exchange, to prop up the forex situation in the country, to give the false impression that we have forex. But when you've killed all the revenue, forex revenue earners, all those plants in Point Lisas, Petrotron, and so where are you going to get foreign exchange? And in this budget 2021, I have not seen one measure that will earn us foreign exchange. Not one. Not one. Because what you have to do is those products, those items that can be sold abroad. In your budget, tell me what it is you're going to sell abroad. What is it that you have put in the budget that you would say that we are here? What is it resetting the economy for growth and stability, or stability and growth? What? I don't see any new revenue streams there that are sustainable. The only revenue streams that are there is tax. Borrow. Engage in fire sales, sell out NP, privatize the port, sell out other assets in your COVID roadmap. You have about selling shares, Kiko, whether it's Trinity Mall or wherever. Fire sales. And this is a buyer's market. It is not a seller's market. So that you're going to have sellout. You're going to get sellout. And is it then again a case of friends, family, and financiers that these are going to? And I urge that government must fully proclaim and implement the procurement law before any sales take place. Before any of these sales take place. We must preserve the patrimony of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Go down to Australia, no tendering process, buying hostile boats. I'll come to that in a moment. So, foreign exchange, forex, we have a hunger. So we don't need cars, we need medicine. And even that we are not getting, as one of the doctors will tell you what has happened with the CDAP. You talk about expanding CDAP. People cannot get medicines out there. So who are we fooling? People don't need cars, we need medicine. Yet you have the gas brains with the millions in revenue foregone for these luxury vehicles. Foreign reserves. 2 very topical issues continue to plague the economy. the continuous decline in our level of foreign reserves, with our level of import cover, and secondly, the availability of foreign exchange, most frequently US dollars for consumers and businesses. In 2010, when we came into office, we met reserves to the tune of a little over $9 billion US dollars, or 12.9 months of import cover. Well done again by late former Prime Minister Manning. Under my tenure, we were able to grow those foreign reserves to a high of almost 1.5 billion US dollars. 1.5 billion US dollars. Okay? I'm sorry, 11.5 billion. From 9 billion US to 11.5 billion US dollars in 2014. The prices declined, oil in 2014, mid-14, yet we still left over 10.4 US billion dollars. We left in foreign reserve 10.4 US billion dollars when we demitted office. In December 2019, before COVID, this incompetent government allowed our reserves to fall below US $7 billion, representing a decline of almost $3.5 billion, a 33% decline in our foreign reserves. The Minister of Finance has now resorted to external borrowings, and of course the drawdowns from the HSF to boost foreign reserves. So they're not real foreign reserves. It is a kind of sleight of hand, a bookkeeping kind of exercise with no real foreign exchange being earned. It must also be noted persons and businesses have severe challenges to get foreign reserves, to get US dollars, which is severely impacting on businesses. So, Minister, in resetting the economy for stability and growth, I would appreciate in your reply or from any of the others that you tell us where in your budget 2021 you're resetting the economy to generate revenue, foreign exchange as revenue. And whilst we do that, I just want to spend a moment on what has been happening with local government. There is a tremendous disparity in the financial allocations to the local government body.
Member for Superior, I just want to advise all members to please comply with Standing Order 53. We know we have certain constraints, and therefore your compliance will assist us in smoothly proceeding. Member for Superior.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I was on the issue of discrimination, the local government discrimination. There are 14 of these local government corporations in Trinidad. When we look at the figures, it is clear that those corporations that are not controlled by the PNM are given much less resources, even though they have far more burgesses there. For REMA, for example, the population, the electorate is 33,606. They got an allocation of $82,437,758. This means that every single 82,437,758, every single individual, if you divide it up, will get $2,453 for the year. Let us compare Chaguanas, a population of 83,000 and a bit more. Chaguanas, comparing 33, and now we are talking about 83,000. They get an allocation of 69,000, just above, which works to $830 per year. In the Chaguanas Borough Corporation, the population is 49,910 more than the Rima Borough Corporation, yet they receive over $13 million less. Do you think that is fair? Do you think that is equality of treatment in this day in Trinidad and Tobago? It also means that individual corporations throughout, in the case of the regional corporations that are controlled by the UNC, Mayaro, Superior, Princess Town, all receive considerably less than those controlled by the PNM. It shows that this is not a government for all. it is a government for a few. Shoguna's lives matter. Kuva Tabaki Talparo lives matter. Diego Martin lives matter. Port of Spain lives matter. But where's the equity of treatment? Where's the equality of treatment from a government body? This is a classic case of discrimination, and I have our lawyers looking at it, and we'll be challenging this allocation on the basis of inequality of treatment by a public authority. I turn now to property tax. Madam, would you be kind enough to give me an idea of time, please?
Your time will expire at 1:03.
I'm sorry.
At 1:03, your time will expire.
What time will it? I'm not hearing. What time will I finish?
Member for Naparima, no one is to remove their mask to speak unless they're inside of, please. Member for Siparia, at 1 p.m., 3 minutes after 1 p.m., your time will expire.
Very much, madam.
And the time now is 11:12.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I apologize that it's a bit difficult to hear with the mask and the booth. So I thank you for repeating. I turn now to property tax. Property tax. Again, bankrupt of ideas to recalibrate the economy, to take us through COVID and thereafter. The government has placed on its list of revenue-raising measures the dreaded property tax. I have called on government repeatedly to hold their hands on the property tax. We are currently facing a pandemic. Thousands have lost jobs, as I've explained, incomes and livelihoods. By law, this property tax is to be calculated on the annual rental assessment of your property. This tax will vary on the use of the property, residential, agricultural, commercial, and so on. Every owner and occupier of land will be liable to pay property tax. So whether you own the land by deed or you're squatting on that land, you are the occupier and you will still have to pay the taxes. Those persons who are currently renting, take note, the landlord will be required to pay property tax as the owner of the property. But whom do you think that extra cost will be passed on to? Whom do you think? So as a tenant, you are also in jeopardy. You think a landlord will say, okay, don't worry. When the landlords themselves are under pressure, just as John Public. At the moment, no valuator has the power to go into someone's home without their permission, unless you're given notice in advance and so on. The government has said they will be moving to use, I think it's Section 29 of the law, to allow for, in effect, mandatory registration for the rules. So the law is that you must have at least 50% of these properties on the rules. I want to ask, why is the first line of attack against residential properties? Why? When these might be the most vulnerable persons, the most vulnerable, these might be the small householder lost his job, family lost job. Why? Why? Why don't we go the industrial and the big commercial ones? Why? Why go the small man again? You may have a public servant who built a house over time, over years, now retired and so on. You really want to advantage these poor old people? With this tax at this time? At this time? I am told that right now there's an ongoing method, a shortcut method for the valuation exercise. So even if you did not fill out your form, government is engaging in curbside valuation, stand up outside by the road and assessing your house from out on the road. Then there are those who say if you send these assessors now in the COVID and given the home invasions and the robberies and so on, people are afraid, they're at risk, and they're already at a disadvantage from having lost jobs, loss of incomes and so on. So curbside, macro, if you want to call it. Just to estimate what your house has, how many bedrooms, how many windows, washrooms, and so on. That could never be right. It's a macro valuation. They're also using deeds submitted by stamp duty in the past 5 years to determine the valuation of your property. Now, there are some people I know, I will not name them, they know who they are, who have found ways to get around putting the correct amount of stamp duty on a deed. So if you're using that, you're also using a kind of escape route. This law, as it stands, gives the government the power to retroactively tax you, because it speaks about property tax from 1st October 2017. So will they be collecting the 3 years in taxes, or will they waive that, as we had done for 5 years, basically? I want to repeat some comments here today, as I hear somebody call it, oh Lord. Yes, God is great. And I agree with you. Hear these words. Presently in my constituency, there is anxiety at both ends of the spectrum. There is anger at both sides of the spectrum, and there is resentment on both sides. And I would tell you why. People are seeing this as a situation that ought not to have been. If you accept my argument or my understanding that it is really a revenue-raising measure and anything else is disingenuous, then people are saying, had we handled our largesse differently, we probably would not have had to resort to this measure. These are the words of the then member for Diego Martins West, present member for Diego Martins West, the present Prime Minister in 2009 on the property tax during that debate in 2009. Now, property tax is not going to come directly in the form of collection by the corporations. It is going into the consultative fund. And again, that is something that the present Prime Minister in his previous incarnations was fighting against. I repeat, I quote again from the Hansard of 18 December 2009. Then member for Diego Martins West, present member. I was hoping that in the context of the local government reform and in the context of this attempt to do what this bill says in the preamble, that it is a paradigm shift. We would have taken the opportunity to really make that paradigm shift based on the Tobago House of Assembly model. That people pay in their district, spend in their district, and hold the people in the district accountable. So 2 points. One, look, everybody vexed. Even 100 is plenty money, $100 is plenty money. This is what the member Jen said, is plenty money. And in these COVID times, it's even worse. If it was bad then, it is 1,000 times worse now in COVID. It is 1,000 times worse. Again, I call on government in these pandemic times to hold your hands on the property tax at this time. At this time. Now you will hear some on the other side saying that the government I led wanted persons to pay property tax. I want to set the record straight today. We came in and we put a moratorium on it until 2015. On 27th August 2015, then Finance Minister Larry Hawaii, as reported in the Trinidad Guardian, August 28, 2015. Headline, Minister, property tax not a priority. Larry Hawaii said this. Government has no intention of implementing the property tax and will seek to extend the amnesty if it is returned to power next month. This is according to Finance and Economy Minister Larry Hawaii, who told yesterday's post-CAB conference that matter was not a priority for the Kamla Persad-Bissessar government. Mr. Hawaii had made an announcement that we'll be considering the tax, but he had also said that there will be consultations. Mr. Hawaii then said, Minister Hawaii then said, after consultations, any move to implement the tax in the proposed matter could potentially impact on investments. And after we evaluated the feedback, we decided we are not proceeding with it in the way that I had originally indicated. He said further, Cabinet has not considered this matter, nor has the matter been brought to Cabinet for consideration at any time in the last 2 years, 2014 or 2015. Statement has been made sometime in 2014. News thing, Hawaii. No property tax. No property tax, Dr. Rowley. Monday, August 24th, 2015. On Friday, 20th February 2015, in this Parliament, I was asked a question to Prime Minister Hansard, February 20th, 2020. This was the question. Can the Prime Minister indicate whether the government will be taking any steps to introduce or reintroduce any system for the collection of land and building taxes or any form of property tax during the current session of Parliament? Then Prime Minister, myself, honourable member, the answer is no. The answer is no. So there's a confusion saying that we were going to put it. I wanted to clear that record. And they're saying, what has changed? Well, today I could ask the member for the Martin West. When we're in a worse situation, what has changed from your feelings back then in 2009? Or was it then that you were on a rampage against the then Prime Minister who had brought the bill to Parliament, the Honourable late Patrick Manning? And this is why you fought the tax, that you were not genuinely caring about the people. Because how could you fight it then, when now we're in a time when the situation is much worse and the suffering is much worse, but you're promoting the tax? And I want to raise a matter which is very sensitive. So whilst we are talking about property tax for citizens and so on, we are seeing exemptions for multi-dwelling properties. Exemptions. Exemptions. Government continues to want to put taxes on people, yeah? But they're self-serving ministers changing the rules. In 2016, the Minister of Finance amended the Income Tax Act to allow for income tax exemptions for something called multi-family dwelling properties. That was never a concept in the law before. Multi-family dwelling properties. I understand they still can't figure out how to define that multi-family dwelling. And why? I invite you to take a drive down Picton Street. You'll see the highest, most posh building going up, one of the biggest multi-family dwellings you'll see in the country. In fact, I don't know of any other. That's the only one I see people on the social media posting up. And who owns it? Who owns it? When this exemption was brought to Parliament in 2016, the minister knew or ought to have known that Belgrave Properties, in which he was a director, had submitted to Town Country Planning an application for the construction of luxury multi-family dwelling. That application of building permit was granted in May 2016. Look, we have documents. In May 2016. The construction of these units would have started after 2016, which would place the law within the exemptions for the Income Tax Act brought in 2016. In other words, self-serving, is it? Was it in breach of the Integrity in Public Life Act that you're giving to yourself a benefit? Did the minister do like his other colleagues? The minister recusing himself 57 times when family business was being discussed in the Parliament? Did the minister recuse himself? Like the Honourable Attorney General, when matters relating to family business, did the minister recuse himself? Taxing vehicles, taxing tires, taxing apples and grapes, but exemptions to others. And it doesn't stop there. Let's fast forward 2021. This budget. Corporation tax exemption for multi-dwelling properties. Again, it doesn't end there. Fast forward 2021. The budget statement at page 116 says, we propose to amend the Corporation Tax Act to allow approved property development companies to claim as a deduction 20% from the present 15% of capital expenditure incurred in the construction of commercial, industrial, or multi-family residential buildings completed on or before 31st December 2024. In this budget, the Minister knows the current Section 16 of the Corporation Tax Act allows for exemptions only with respect to commercial and industrial buildings. We brought this new concept in again. No. And we'll see what happens when we come to amend the Corporation Tax Act to include this new exemption. Now proposing with this amendment to increase the tax exemption from 15% to 20%. Is this to include the multifamily residential buildings? Yeah, Laura. Does it include that? Minister will tell us. And when we come to the corporation tax amendment to put in this increased deduction, yeah, we'll develop more. We'll go into the details. It will not be surprising this has happened with the Income Tax Act. Madam Speaker, I always advocate for lower taxes across the board for every citizen. You cannot tax yourself into prosperity. You can't. As I said before when we were talking about revenues from tax and so on, in spite of all those taxes the minister has been bringing on, the tax revenue has fallen over the time. We are not against tax breaks, which benefit all of the citizens, even the Minister of Finance. After all, he is a citizen of the country. But his self-serving actions concerning tax breaks on possibly his properties, again shows how they govern. They govern. They will never do something for the good of the people unless they are first assured that they themselves will benefit. That is a historical hallmark of P&M policy and politics. By this income tax amendment and by this new corporation tax exemptions, again, are we in breach of the Integrity in Public Life Act? Was there a conflict of interest when they took this before the cabinet? Did the minister recuse himself from the meeting when the budget documents, because I know they come to the cabinet for approval, when the measures, the fiscal measures and others, they come to the cabinet? Did the minister recuse himself, say, hey, listen, guys, you know I have a property, multi-story, multi-residential family and so on. Listen, I can't stay in this meeting. I can't participate. Did that happen? Did that happen? I ask you, members on the other side. So there are several questions. We look forward to responses. I turn now to some of the sectors. Energy sector. Again, this sector is in shambles because of the incompetence of that government. And it is in shambles before COVID. I want to make a point again, before COVID. Before COVID. After 5 years of mismanagement and incompetence, the energy sector is now facing a full-blown crisis and is in complete shambles. Whilst the Minister of Energy would have us believe that stability and growth was returning to the energy sector pre-COVID-19, his own review of the economy shows us that under this administration, the sector has experienced consecutive periods of decline. And this clearly is a case of a sector running on fumes. Yes, ma'am. Today, anyone who drives through Pointe-à-Pierre at night, you will notice the darkness that has befallen the once bright lights of that petroleum refinery. And those lights were extinguished by this government. Those lights were put out, never forget. Those lights were extinguished by this government. Many of us in the Southland and those from the north who come south, you would know where you were when you saw the flame flaring, the whatever it was there in the refinery flared. When you see that, you know you're near reach home, or you know if you were further down south, how far away you were. It's gone. That once proud piece of history of Trinidad and Tobago, the lights were extinguished by that incompetent government. Under our government, the national oil and gas belt has turned into a national scrap iron belt. Scrap iron. I want you to remember that we left behind a petroleum refinery in 2015 that paid $3.1 billion by way of taxes and royalties to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We left a refinery with throughput reaching 138,688 barrels of oil per day. In fact, the refinery throughput in 2015 was 20% higher than even in 2014. We left behind thousands of jobs, with persons benefiting directly and indirectly because of the operations of that refinery. That's because we were responsible, capable, and competent government. We didn't have a minister of energy who only found out Paria fuel was being put up for sale when he read about it in the newspaper. You all remember that? After thousands of job losses, a major forex earner to our nation, $3 billion of debt placed on taxpayers, the closure of the refinery will go down in the annals of our history as one of the biggest tragedies perpetrated against the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Point Lisas is another national crisis looming. Another national crisis looming. Today, our nation is facing another PNM-made crisis with the collapse of the Point Lisas industrial estate. Madam Speaker, for the first time in our nation's history, so many petrochemical plants have halted their operations. 6 plants which brought in billions in revenue and employed hundreds of workers have shut down their operations. We must not for 1 minute let government continue with the narrative that these plants were closed due to COVID, because before this virus even hit our shores, massive plants such as Yara, ArcelorMittal, Methanol Holdings, they were shut down. This was before COVID. Remember that. Remember that. Before COVID. No matter what they tell us, the collapse of Point Lisas lies at the feet of this government's botched Houston negotiations. Botched Houston negotiations. The millions lost in revenue, the hundreds of job losses at Point Lisas are a direct result of the Rowley-led regime's poor negotiations with upstreamers, which resulted in an uncompetitive natural gas price, a problem which downstreamers have been complaining about in recent years. So the government went from blame Kamla, blame COVID, even though Point Lisas estates began collapsing well before COVID. There was a news report in the Trinidad Guardian, January 25, 2020, when there was no COVID shutdown. That news report was, headline, manufacturers brace for job cuts if NGC hikes gas price. The report written before the COVID pandemic reached our shores says that, and I quote, the NGC is already demanding that the manufacturing sector pay 13% more for natural gas this year, moving as high as a 100% increase by 2023. The NGC has been embroiled in difficult negotiations with all its customers as it tries to significantly increase prices because of its new deal with the oil and gas majors that have made significant price increases for the aggregator. The deal, which was brokered by Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, means that the NGC has to pass on price hikes to its customers, many of whom say they cannot pay the new prices. This has already led to the loss of scores of high-paying jobs and tens of millions of dollars to the Treasury, the closure of an ammonia plant, and the plant shutdown of a methanol plant in a week. This is, I'm quoting from the article, January 2020. January 2020. So pre-COVID, the gas negotiation, price negotiation, whatever, we don't even know what they negotiated, brokered by the Prime Minister, the best salesman of the country, and by his young minister, Minister Stuart Young, in Houston. Broken. And there is more evidence from the hands on record, from what they said when they came back, that they were the ones who were responsible for those unsustainable and non-competitive prices. This news report, of course, has become our unfortunate reality with multiple plant closures occurring on the Point Lisa's industrial estate. The Prime Minister, with arrogance, has destroyed Point Lisa's and the thousands of jobs because he was a gas negotiator. Both Point Lisa's and Petrotrin were destroyed by the same government in just 5 years before COVID. Before COVID. Still on the energy sector. Still on the energy sector. Lowest oil production for over half a century. Lowest oil production for over half a century under this government. The Rowley administration has not only brought chaos and crisis, as well as underdevelopment to Point Lisa's and Petrotrin, but also to our oil sector. February 2020, again before COVID, was a historic month for us in Trinidad and Tobago, but not for good reasons, not for good reasons at all. According to a report in Oil Now magazine in this month of February 2020, oil production in TNT reached 55,685 barrels per day. That is the lowest production since the 1950s. The lowest production since the 1950s. Forget the 1980s. Government has taken our energy sector back to the 1950s. In June this year 2020, Heritage Petroleum, one of the replacements for Petrotrin, said that they had earned $5.4 billion in its first 10 months of operations. Well, you know, that sounds good. Until you factor in that Heritage is currently producing 40,000 barrels a day, which is even less than we did in February. 40,000 barrels a day, less than we did in February. So the oil production is going down. And then the minister comes wringing his hand and crying crocodile tears. Oh, it's the prices, the oil prices. Listen, goodness me. Yes, price is a factor, but you must have product to sell. And when the product keeps decreasing, then you're going to get less and less and less money. And that has been what has been happening, that the production has been falling and falling. Tell us why. You created all these new companies, whatever. Why is production continue to fall? What went wrong? And it wasn't COVID. Again, it was happening before COVID. So the government wants to blame the failures in this sector, oil and gas, on the price. You know, as I said, there's nothing innovative or creative in generating new revenue streams in the budget. It's just like a pie in the sky waiting for a miracle to happen that one day the price will go up again. But in the meantime, what is your production level, which continues to fall? Had you been serious, you would have taken steps to increase production. Speaking of low production, let's look at the natural gas sector, the real backbone of our economy. When the government I led demitted office in 2015, natural gas production was 3.8 billion standard cubic feet per day. I repeat, 3.8 billion standard cubic feet per day. And that is in spite of temporary platform closures by multinationals between 2011 and 14 because they had to do maintenance work. According to a news report by Oil Now magazine, September 2nd, 2020, natural gas production in TNT has fallen to its lowest level since 2016, averaging a mere 3.1 billion standard cubic feet per day. So that too is falling. The report goes on to say that natural gas production declined or fell at a fall of over 400 million standard cubic feet a day. And I quote from the article what that means. The numbers are just numbers. What does it mean? To put it into perspective, the 400 SCFD is equivalent to all the gas used to power the entire country. So you have a fall of that. But it's equivalent to all the gas used to power the entire country. It is enough gas to power Atlantic LNG's Train 1 before its bottlenecking. It is also enough gas to run 4 methanol plants and an ammonia plant. Oil Now magazine, September 20, talking about the decline in our natural gas production. I am proud to stand today and say that it was achievements of the government I led, especially in relation to success of projects like BP Juniper and Angeline, amongst others, that have saved our economy during these past 5 difficult years. In fact, the growth of 1.9% TT experienced in 2018, which the Minister loves to point out, is entirely due to natural gas projects of the government island. They have done nothing. I hear again now in this budget about the Laurent Manatee. We've been hearing about this Laurent Manatee field for decades. And now the government comes to tell us, on top of their poor decisions on Petrotrin and Point Lisas, which has led to their destruction, government is now embarking on an even more dangerous scenario. They have opted to go it alone and develop our side of the Laurent Manatee gas field. Most of the gas field, more than 70%, is claimed by Venezuela. The development of this field is a vastly complex issue. Discussions for the development of this field have been ongoing across successive administrations because of its very intricate nature. Now with the Maduro regime and Venezuelan companies such as their national oil company, PDVSA, they are under U.S. sanctions, and the issue is even more complex. It is highly unusual and ill-advised for one party to proceed to tap into this field under the best of circumstances, far less in the highly volatile atmosphere currently surrounding the Maduro regime. Will we be opening ourselves up if we have dealings with the Maduro regime in terms of the sanctions that they are under? Some are even suggesting, I'm not saying it, but some are even suggesting this is a way for the Maduro regime to go through Trinidad to market the oil, because they can't do it themselves because of the sanctions from the U.S. So I strongly urge government that any development of the Laurent Manatee field needs to be done with very transparent and legal guidelines and frameworks agreed upon by all parties. Otherwise, we could potentially expose our nation to substantial risk. I turn now to the proposal to sell the NP gas stations. On the selling, privatizing of all NP gas stations, contrary to what the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance may have stated, NP's business model is not in the distribution field anymore, or fuel anymore. What makes NP profitable in today's market economy is the franchise agreements with petroleum dealers and or retailers. NP obtains its profits under the current business model plan of the management and rental operations of gas stations and the networks, and this includes convenience stores. Is someone?
Cannot hear the opposition leader.
So I want to warn both sides, because also the person who stood, the honorable member who stood and raised the objections, I've also been hearing you. So I want to urge both sides to comply with Standing Order 53.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So NP is really getting their profits under the current business model by management and rental operations of the gas station network, and this includes convenience stores operated by the dealers. However, the dealer-owned stations and dealer-operated stations are the less profitable ones to NP. The management of service stations amounts to 70% of the NP businesses and most of NP's profits. The official records of the NP shows in Trinidad and Tobago there are about 113 NP gas stations, and 75 of them are owned by the company, and the other 38 of them are owned by dealers. These 75 stations, they bring in the majority of profits for NP. So with the government now proposing to sell these stations, they will have removed the profitability of NP as an organization, and that would lead to NP making a further loss. question now is the government signaling that in the same way that they closed down Petrotrin, they are now closing down NP, another energy company? Are they going to come and put more than 500 permanent employees and their families on the breadline, as well as the thousands of citizens who are dependent NP contractors? The government's track record has shown their callous approach to labor relations. They will show little remorse in taking the food off the kitchen tables of these employees. With respect to the sale of the 75 stations, the estimated value of the stations owned by NP is approximately $1 billion. Let me repeat that. The 75 stations, estimated value, $1 billion. And that will have an approximate value of 15 million each for one of these. We will be looking very closely at this process because we are very concerned whether this is a scheme, as I said before, to raise money by selling out Lifeline to friends, family, and financiers. We are saying there must be no fire sale of these assets before the procurement legislation is operational. It has come to our attention that many, if not all, of these 75 stations recently before elections signed a new 10-year lease on the franchise agreement with NP. What this means is that should a current dealer not be able to purchase the station, does it mean that NP will now have to pay off these dealers for their 10-year contracts? What does it mean? Because they're holding 10-year contracts. Is this, as some are asking, part 2 of the gas station racket P&M style? Are we to see another GMALS, gas station racket 1? People are asking these questions. We are also looking at the possible formation of cartels. And I took no comfort from the words of the Prime Minister that the government will make sure that there's no price gouging and no cartel formations and so on, or words to that effect. I take no comfort from that because we really don't even have legislation to prevent cartel formation in order to fix prices. Right now, there's a company in Europe, Siemens, I think they're a lighting company. And they have been caught because there is law, there is legislation, where they got together basically as a cartel to fix prices. So they would agree to fix the prices, but they went further in establishing that. Fix the price, so we'll agree to sell at a price, whether that is the price we bought it for or not. And the second aspect, they farmed off where. So they will say, okay, you will sell in the east, you will sell in the north, you will sell in the south. So they worked it in a way, of course, for maximum benefit. Listen, businessmen want to make money, and they will do what is necessary. So I take no comfort that government will prevent it. The only way you may be able to prevent it or try is to bring legislation. The other aspect of it, we can't even prevent price gouging in the supermarket. And we are talking about, big business people who would buy these $1 million gas stations. So there's a concern that we have that these privatization and deregulation of the retail fuel prices means that it opens up the definite possibility of cartel retail business in this very vital sector. But this will affect every person in this country. The cost of living, cost of transport, everything will go up because of fuel prices if this is not managed properly. When the government announces its selling price of fuel to retailers at the beginning of every month, one would expect that the Petroleum Dealers Association will suggest a retail selling price of the fuel. Okay, so you buy it at a price, but then you get together and decide what to sell it for. No retailer is mandated to use the suggested price, and they can, I say, form a cartel with other retailers to set a much higher price. This would mean that maxis and taxis may be forced to raise their fare prices. We will pay more at the pumps. This is a higher cost of living for everyone. They must ensure a price cap at the pump to protect citizens from price gouging. So if you want to do this, you will have to put a price cap at the pump. Most of NB gas stations are located in the very best and prime real estate locations. Remember that? Would this be a case of big business buying up prime properties throughout Trinidad and Tobago? Would it be that if they buy it as a gas station, they must continue to operate as a gas station? Would there be a condition? Or would it be we get prime property throughout the country and then we set up whatever business we want, close down the gas station, and put up some other kind of business that we think will bring in more money? So we have prime lands, prime property, millions of dollars. Another point on this matter is the potential for the closure of stations in certain areas. There is only, at this time, one supplier of fuel, and that is located at Point-a-Pier, as Parrot Trading. This is the only important wholesaler point of sale in the Trinidad. The price offered by Parrot will be the same to all gas station retailers at any given time. We don't know, we have not been told. So Parrot is the sole seller, important seller of the fuel. We have the gas stations, but listen, the main but not sole factor that will determine the retail cost will be the cost of trucking the fuel to the various gas stations around the country. So gas stations that are closer to the Point-a-Pier, the bond, buy the fuel, they will have a lower trucking cost, and maybe they may be able to offer lower prices at the pump than a gas station that is situated further away. So this we can then look at is that persons on the East Coast, deep south, north, west of the island, further away from the bond where the gas is, the fuel is, will incur higher pump prices than persons situated in areas on the West Coast and San Fernando area. Will this then mean that motorists from these more distant locales may choose to refuel in transit on or to passing by Point-a-Pier in close proximity or to stations that are close to Parrot? So MP for Mayaro, a person commuting from their Mayaro or Point 14 residence to San Fernando may want to refill in San Fernando because you may get a cheaper price because of this trucking matter that I've spoken. Eventually, gas stations in areas further away from the supply point will suffer poor sales and could possibly face closures, leading to fuel deserts in various parts of the country. So let's look out. When the fridge door closes again, national petroleum doors are shut permanently, like Carney and Petrotrin, and all the employees would be marching left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, outside the door of NP House. So just a few questions to government on this sale, NP sales. What are the long-term benefits for government's revenue streams when all valuable assets are sold to private entities, as the NP assets? What happens at the pumps when the cartels are formed? What is the plan? Will dealers be able to buy directly from Parafuel or directly on the open market? What happens if not controlled and a cap is not placed on the price per litre at the pump? What happens to the billion-dollar gantry at Carney that now sits like a white elephant? It has never been operationalized. I am told it's being staffed every month by taxpaying citizens. Will this also be sold at a peppercorn price to friends, family, and financiers? What will become of that massive gantry at Carney? I turn now, I've spoken about the loss of jobs and so on, and this privatization of the patrimony of the things that belong to the taxpayers of this country. We want to remember, how it is that we took the benefits from Petrotrin with respect to the oil and gas and so on, oil, and we tried to pass it on to the ordinary citizens. It was a brilliant plan by the late Dr. Eric Williams, that the wealth of the nation belonged to all the citizens of the nation. And that is how, with Texaco, that he bought it over and made it into a government asset to benefit the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That is where the issue of the subsidy and so on arose. that the wealth of the country must be shared, the collective wealth of the country, from the oil and gas under the earth, that should be shared with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Are we now saying that we are going to give this away to the big businesses? Are we going to give it, as I say, friends, financiers, and family, and so on? It's a total shift. And maybe the minister might come and tell me why it is necessary for this total shift in the paradigm, in the business model that we had. Why is it necessary to do this, especially at this time of COVID? Why? When so many are already suffering, when so many others lose their jobs, when so many others, when the subsidies move, when the prices go up at the pump, we'll have to face that hardship. Minister, please explain for us. Let's turn now to privatization of the port. Now, there are two models. They help raise funding to conduct business. Or there are more than two, but I can mention two. You can have private-public partnerships. Or you can have outright privatization. The government has chosen the model of privatization of the port of Port of Spain. The other model is where the government still retains some equity. So we have what they call a 3P model. Government instead is going with, look, sell it out, give it away, privatize it. And some may tell us why that is the best model. Was there a report done on this? What does that report say? Please share it with us. What tells us this is a good model to follow for the port? And who says that private business is the best way to go? What is the feasibility? Many private businesses shut down, you know. There's no magic because it's a private business. And again, the question will arise, what is the disposal of property? What is the process for tendering this out? We'll be very curious. Again, we say don't do it until you have fully implemented procurement legislation. So on the 9th January 2019, the Express reported that from 2 weeks at that date, the Port Authority will make a presentation to the Ministry on the future of the port. 9 months later, Minister of Finance announced that by the end of fiscal 2021, a private sector operator will handle the operations of the port. Again, I say government needs to act in a transparent manner. And let's see the documents. Maybe you have a good reason for this. Let's see the documents. Yes, there are inefficiencies at the port, but that doesn't mean you pick it up and give it away. Tell us why that is a preferred model instead of dealing with issues at the port. I call on government again to hold their hands until, as I said, full implementation of procurement. Now, that port issue too could see loss of jobs. That port issue could see another scandal with the way in which this property is disposed of. So it is an area we'll be watching very closely. I turn now to national security. National security. My colleagues will develop more on national security, but there's an aspect of national security. One is the Ministry of National Security, and there is the Ttps. So I'll just talk a little on Ministry of National Security. Following the September 2015 general election, we left plans, policies, projects, research, institutions, infrastructure, a strong relationship with global partners that really helped us to have a great measure of success in the fight against crime. We never kept these plans secret, and they were underscoring that crime is not a partisan matter. We shared our ideas and strategies. Since September 2015, we met twice with government to share ideas on the fight against crime. Regretfully, our efforts came to nothing, since government reneged on some agreements and abandoned the collaborative approach by reverting to personal insults, baseless allegations against some. So I will leave this area for our shadow national security persons, because I want to get to something I think that is even more vital at this time. And that is What government has done in this 2021 budget is really to foreshadow a police shutdown of the TTPS in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll share with you why. At a time when home invasions and robberies have increased drastically, we see a very concerning cut in finances to the TTPS in these estimates. A reduction in allocations for the TTPS at a time when we see home invasions, robberies everywhere. Thank you. There has been an overall reduction for the TTPS in the item known as goods and services from 515 million, that's about over, in fiscal 2020 to 334 million about fiscal 2021. So what's that? In these estimates, a reduction of $181,157,278 to the TTPS. Just in the item, goods and services. Understand that. The goods and services budget allocation for 2020, as I said, 515,847,200. But you know what? The TTPS only received releases of around 400,000. So there was a shortfall of 400 million. So there was a shortfall of 100 million in the 2020 allocation, and now a reduction. What this means is that the TTPS was unable to pay contractors and other agencies who have done work for the TTPS. Many of these contractors are still owed by the TTPS, and they have indicated that they will soon no longer service the TTPS. These include the repairs of vehicles, supplies of materials, and so on. Further, where are the funds in these estimates for the much spoken about drones that the TTPS were to acquire to help in patrolling of the coastline and intelligence gathering? Where is the allocation? With the 2021 allocation being 181 million, as well as a 100 million shortfall in releases in last fiscal, it means the TTPS are starting the 2021 fiscal year in a $282 million hole. Now you will say this is not a lot of money, but we are talking about security, we're talking about crime prevention. We are talking of a very sensitive area in our lives and in our nations, in this society. Vehicles. The TTPS was allocated 40 million, fiscal 20. You know how much was allocated in this fiscal year, 2021? Can you imagine? For vehicles, zero. Zero for vehicles. And citizens keep saying they don't see a police vehicle, they don't see patrols, nothing is happening. Zero. Zero. International best practices dictate the police forces worldwide annually change out 20% of their vehicles, thereby ensuring the police force has vehicles that can stand up to the rigors of patrolling and police work. $0 for vehicles to the TTPS. This also reduces the maintenance required by the fleet, resulting in fewer breakdowns, fewer vehicles in the shop, more vehicles on the road. By that turnover, as I said, of 20%, that you take the vehicles in, that you change them out. So you will allow you to do repairs, fewer breakdowns, fewer vehicles in the shop, more vehicles on the road, which we need. I don't know if you understand what is happening in some parts of Trinidad and Tobago. The home invasions, the ordinary homes, these are not mansions. In fact, the bandits probably not even going to mansions because so much security may be there. Just ordinary people, old people, home invasions. A young lady was telling me her husband lost his job and she had to go out to work. She got a job in a small, what we used to call a long time, a shop. Not a supermarket, a shop. And she got this job there on a very secondary road, not any major place. And she says since she got that up, they have been robbed 3 times. 3 times robberies. And she says she's so scared, but she has no choice. She has to go to work. She has to feed her children. Husband having lots of job. So the home invasions, the robberies, yes, there may be a decrease with the murders related to the lockdown with the COVID and less people are out, but these other crimes are happening against ordinary citizens. And here we are. Would you give in for vehicles? 0 to the police, and then you want to talk with police. Or they're lazy and they this and they that. Today I salute the police officers of Trinidad and Tobago for the job they're doing. They're working under very trying circumstances. They're being under-resourced by this government. Under-resourced. So that when you come to say the police not doing their job, but they don't have the resources. If this happens now with the 0 for the vehicles, what's going to happen? When you call police to come out, where they come in? How they come in? Bicycle? I saw a guy saying now maybe motorcycles might get more sales because people can't buy cars as before, so how will they go out? You need the patrols because the lawlessness is increasing. So, 0 allocation means that for fiscal 2021, they cannot buy any new vehicles. They cannot replace any aging vehicles. They cannot replace any vehicles that have been damaged on operations. And so, less working vehicles for the police. The minister also mentioned a mobile command center for the Ttps. But how can the Ttps acquire needed equipment? It will allocated no funds for the purchase of vehicles. This is a mobile command center. We have no funds to buy vehicles. How are you going to do this? In fiscal 2020, the Ttps was allocated 39 million for vehicle maintenance. So first they get nothing for vehicles. For vehicle maintenance, this figure has been reduced to 19 million. So there's a cost of a drop of about $20 million for maintenance. So no new vehicles, 0. And then you're cutting for maintenance. With this 0 allocation for purchase of vehicles, government has reduced the allocation for repairing vehicles. It is also understood that there are bills outstanding from fiscal 2020 in the tune of over $12 million. So this money TTPS is getting now in this fiscal, they will only have some $7 million to repair and keep on the road vehicles currently in the fleet. What does that mean? They're owing. So the money allocated will go to pay back bills. We can expect more breakdowns, again, less car patrols. The TTPS announced the formation of the Marine Unit. Government has only allocated $500,000 to establish the coastal and riverine, if that's the word. I think the minister spoke about that, this coastal and riverine, boasting about it. Patrol unit. When the purchase of vessels for this unit will average close to $1 million per vessel. So what is this $500,000 about? Are you serious that you want this coastal and riverine patrol unit? Every day people send you pictures of Venezuelans coming in up by the North Coast. You've seen boats coming in. Well, don't talk about Cedros. Cedros has been overrun by illegal migrants coming in. So you need this. You need this for border security, border safety. This is totally not going to get that unit. That $500,000 might just sit there as an administrative, because if you don't get the units, then you can't do anything else. Government has purchased, on the other hand, starving the TTPS. They went down Australia, down under. Talked about it before. 2 brand new 50-meter K-class vessels from Australia for the Coast Guard. No procurement processes, no proper procurement processes. And they bought this for the Coast Guard, when the Coast Guard have already in their fleet 6 fully operational 50-meter damming vessels, which we had engaged and had bought for Trinidad and Tobago. But they're parked up in Strawberries Bay, I'm told. Why? Because they either have lack of manpower or lack of fuel. Can you imagine that? We run down Australia to buy this big boat. 2, not 1, 2. I hope you could get money for manpower and fuel for this one, or it will end up parked and rusting in Strawberries Bay as the damming vessels. I come now to the allocation of medical expenses for the TTPS. 1.5 million. I'm told this is a drop in the bucket, consider some treatment for a single officer can cost in excess of 500,000. That's for one. So this 1.5 million is going nowhere, a drop in the bucket. And you know, whilst I raise this, whatever happened to the grant that we had proposed to the family, for the families of officers who died in the line of duty. They came with a song and dance in this parliament when they formed the government. And up to today, 5 years later, they have not put into legislation the framework for the officers. You will ask me, Minister Young, you can look at me, and look surprised.
Members, no crosstalk, please. Member for Superior, please direct your remarks to the chair. And members, again, please refrain from crosstalk.
Through the plexi, I saw very malvolently. So I'll withdraw for my colleague. I'm saying, Attorney General, Madam Speaker, I'm guided. I'm guided by your comments.
Comments
Sure,
to the chair, please.
I'm in a very good mood today. I will take your guidance. Thank you very much. So, the Attorney General had said he would bring the legislation, well, 5 years later. Maybe in the second term, they may bring it. It was never done. You will tell me, well, I didn't do it. No, we put it in place coming to the end of our term, and the legislation had to be brought to give legal validity to it. Since then, even without the legislation, how many police officers who have died in the line of duty, how many of their families have benefited? How many of them? Any at all? Do you have another mechanism for doing it? And that should not be right, because then it's on a discretionary basis, that if you feel to give him or you don't want to give him or give her, it should not be by discretion. It should be according to law. But when the criteria is met, the police officer will automatically be entitled and will not have to go and beg a minister to say, you know, apply, you know, man, please make it happen. It should be according to law. They deserve that. They put their lives at stake on a daily basis. And therefore, should such accident befall them, not that we wish it, their families should be properly taken care of. So back to medical expenses, I'm saying a drop in the bucket in terms of allocation. Now, that 1.5 million medical would be manageable if the TTPS had medical insurance to help cover excessive costs. But government has allocated 0 for medical insurance for them. It means that an officer requiring an urgent operation, they'll have to pay out of their own pocket, you know, large sums to cover expenses out of their pockets. With the number of crimes against women, I turn to another matter, and I think the Honourable Minister mentioned these special units that the TTPS has launched. Crimes against women. TTPS has launched a gender-based violence unit. They've also launched a sexual victims unit. Unfortunately, government didn't see it fit to place any allocations in these units. No allocation. A gender-based violence, we've seen what has been happening. People say you don't choose what, you don't choose what it is the Prime Minister told us. Choose wisely or something like that. No, you have to. And that's what you're there for. Put some money into these units. Too many women are being abused. So the gender-based violence unit and the sexual victim unit, no money, 0 into these units. So while the TTPS was developing these special victims locations where rape or abuse victim would be able to be interviewed, swabs taken, timely basis, to be counseled in a special design facility, these victims now will have to remain unattended in the main office in full view of everyone. I think government, you may want to really seriously consider, Minister of Finance, funding the Special Victims Unit, funding the Gender-Based Violence Unit. The TTPS uses technology platforms and software that have to be renewed on an ongoing basis, with many of the investigative systems utilizing foreign-based platforms. The annual and monthly fees required far exceed the fiscal 2021 allocation for fees of $13.9 million. The outstanding bills from the previous fiscal year due to lack of releases that will now have to come out of the present 21 allocation. So the TTPS runs the great risk of not paying for license for systems such as AFIS, which is the auto fingerprinting identification system, and the system will not be available to the TTPS if we don't pay. It means all the databases and intelligence gathering software will cease to operate. It also means that all the GPS installed on the TTPS vehicles and the onboard cameras will not be transmitted to the command centers. This is a serious matter. Again, Minister, please reconsider. We have heard the Minister of National Security speak of increasing the number of recruits for the TTPS to allow the TTPS to be at full strength within a period of 4 to 5 years. However, again, in this budget, government has cut the allocation under item 02001 for fiscal 2020 from 18 million to 11 million, a reduction of $6.5 million. This shortfall will not be able to allow the TTPS to recruit the numbers required to sell or even to fill the present vacancies. Still on the TTPS, and why am I spending so much time on this? Because I think safety and security is of paramount importance at this time. The minister spoke about TTPS getting body cameras, pepper spray, tasers, non-lethal equipment, other equipment required urgently by the TTPS to equip officers. Again, with the reduction in the allocation for purchase of mining equipment, fiscal $73.6 million down to $8 million. So you see, people say the budget ain't bad, but the devil is in the details. The devil is in the details. You come here and minister is rhapsodizing and, his usual cherry self. We have to give him credit for that. He wasn't very cherry on Monday, I must say, however. Might be the plexi box. And at the end of the day, seems to have convinced some people that the budget ain't bad. But we need to take time to go down into the details and see what is happening here. We have to see where the allocations have gone, where they haven't gone, and what is the impact it would have. And I see TTPS allocations, there's going to be a shutdown in the TTPS if something isn't done about the allocations of all these items. And I'm not saying is that they will go on strike. It is just that they will not be able to perform their functions as they would want to, and as they should. I turn to one sector again, which is agriculture, and this sector has to be the most unbelievable portion of the whole budget switch. It is preposterous. It is unbelievable. It is incredible that this Minister of Finance will come to talk here about agriculture. Imagine the minister is telling this country with a straight face how it is going to improve and support the agricultural sector. How can anyone take them seriously on this? The minister laments decades-old malaise, structural impediments inherent in the agricultural sector. He states that decades ago, this malaise cracked the willpower of farmers and farming families. Minister, who is responsible for that? Who is responsible for the decades of malaise? There's only been one government there for decades. No other government has ever been there for decades. Decades of malaise, structural impediments. The malaise cracked the willpower of farmers and farming families. Just last year, let us remember P&M ministers sitting right in this parliament were laughing in this very house at our honest and hard-working bhaji and pumpkin farmers. You remember that? Giggling, laughing at these farmers. The Prime Minister, Minister of Agriculture, publicly wrote off the local sector saying, we don't have enough land. We could never be globally competitive. I've been talking about agriculture for a while now. The Prime Minister said, don't bother with Kamla. Don't bother with that lady. We don't have land. Now they come in to talk about vertical agriculture and talk about aquaponics. Look, you see that? On God's face, we are not going to see under this incompetent government. Not going to see. That is an attitude ingrained in them. They simply don't have the will or desire to improve agriculture. The fact is, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. The whole history has been to undermine farming. Remember the closing of the Carry complex, the whole agricultural manufacturing and drainage complex surrounding it. An example. Shutting down the railway which faithfully serviced rural agricultural communities is another. Since independence, the PNM turned its back on agriculture, turned the country into a dependent petro economy. That's what happened. Let's face it. Starved the agriculture sector of investment, access roads, marketing, support, and even human dignity. The budgets of the PNM have been so full of broken promises and pitiful allocations. No wonder agriculture contributes less than 1% of our GDP. That has been the plan ever since. And you know, even that 500 million the minister talked about as a stimulus package for agriculture, if that ever gets implemented, is miserly. This is far less than the regular allocations we used to give to the sector in our administration. And I want to point out something, Minister. I'll be very happy if you or any one of your colleagues will tell us where is this allocation of 500 million. Because when you pick up the appropriations bill, which is a document that the Parliament will approve, there is no mention anywhere of any $500 million in the draft, in the bill. And it is numbers in the bill that the Parliament will approve. So tell us, where is it? Where is it? Or is it that you'll come in the midterm or you'll come next year and say, okay, we're ready with the 500 million? And then the question to ask is, why all the incentives that were put in a year back or 2 years, why they're not working? You have to get to that problem. Why is it that those are not working? You come in to throw another 500 million. It's not just about the money, I saw the farmers are saying. It's a whole issue of land tenure, whole issue of ownership of land, the problems that they face, because when they go for the incentives, they cannot produce a deed, they cannot produce legal ownership, and therefore they cannot access the incentive. Those things have to be fixed as well. So these budget pledges, perhaps more than any other, this will clearly be a case of PNM promises never materialize. And how do we know? We will know when we see the broken promises by this government in agriculture. Budget after budget after budget. I'll leave it to my colleague who's shadowing the agriculture portfolio. I have it here, but I'll leave it for them in the interest of time. None of those promises have materialized. We talk big, budget after budget. These promises are broken. We don't have any reason to believe if you broke all those promises, didn't happen, never materialized before COVID, I can't see it happening. I really refuse to believe it will happen during COVID or after COVID under your watch. So agriculture, as I say, is an area that, yes, we should develop. It is good. We need food security. But there must be implementation. I mentioned before that part of the problem of the PNM, this government, is they have an implementation deficit. They have a delivery deficit. So talk is talk to talk, but in terms of getting the work done, it doesn't happen. I turn now to the sector relating to education, and again, I'll just touch on this. My colleague shadowing this will speak more on it. Let me congratulate all the students who wrote the SE. And in very troubling times, I congratulate them, I congratulate their parents and their teachers that they were able to complete the exercise. And let me say I'm proud to see 3 girls who topped the essay exam this year. Education and training perhaps got the biggest budget and biggest allocation in this budget, but it's also the biggest mama guy. It is hedged on the moving into a digital era. And I don't think we can take them seriously on that. In 2020, the government for decades has talked about how important it is to shift into a digital transformation. And now, more a reactionary measure to COVID. When I started the laptop program in 2010, they ridiculed it, they vilified it, they belittled it. They lacked the vision and the foresight to see the importance of such a very important move. 5 years later, they wish they had that program in place. In April, they had a goal to announce that 65,000 did not have devices, the students, to access the education learning platforms. We must ask what data drove government to scrap the laptop program in the first place. Over 100,000 laptops were distributed. It is unquestionable that even if half that amount was distributed, between 15 to 20, we would be more prepared for the kinds of times we're in. This same administration has spent close to $30 billion on education between 16 and 20. And what do we have to show for it? So many schools remain incomplete, overgrown with bush and vine. So many schools for the past 5 years have not been serviced. And so more money again is not better ideas. 2020, we are still getting promises from 2015. Remember, 2015 they promised Wi-Fi, you know. 5 years later, what do we do? Back to Wi-Fi. Back to Wi-Fi. In the October 2015 budget, the minister talked about broadband all over. Comes back again in this budget to talk about broadband everywhere. You believe them? It is very difficult to believe anything this minister tells us. Very difficult. So, they left schools at almost 90% complete for 5 years. If you go back to try to fix those schools, you're going to have to go back almost to scratch. The cost will be far more than if you had just completed them. Leaving the UWO South Campus closed. The famous one, Old Puch always speaks of, Ramaitri Sindhu. I'll talk about the Shiva boys, the Parvati girls, 2 abandoned half or 3/4 complete schools. And you know now they're not even in the estimates for they're still not there all these years later. There are many, many more. And our shadow education person will name some of them for you. I speak of those because they are in my constituency, so I'm familiar with them. I want to turn to digitalization of the economy. The minister's excited proclamation of plans for a digital economy reminds me of an animated child with a brand new toy. An animated child with what he thinks is a brand new toy. The minister almost breathlessly detailed some modern tech language, expecting it to resonate with a demoralized population. His persistent challenge, however, to pronounce the term digitalization, and I'm also having difficulty, digitalization, showed a lack of familiarity with the word, far less the concept. For government, I think this is just a slogan. Thank you. This is just a slogan. It is not an all-pervasive process. In the era of remote learning, online work processes, government distributes reams of photocopying paper, and you know what? To schools that don't even have a photocopier. So much for this digital economy in Trinidad and Tobago. This is the same government that has not been able to introduce a modern National Statistical Institute, which was a PNM 2015 general election promise. This is the administration that has seen the country become the least competitive business society in the Caribbean, according to the repeated ease of doing business metrics. And you think, The minister made a confession here on Monday when he read the budget. He confessed that the ease of doing business is intolerable. Who's been there for the past 5 years? Who was the Minister of Finance for the past 5 years? Who has brought us to where we are at 105 on the ease of doing business? All of that happened before COVID. How are you going to take us out of that now? You announce it, but you're going to deal with it. You're going to improve the ease of doing business. How? How are you going to do it? What are the specifics? What are the benchmarks? What are the targets? So it's all talk, because we've been talking that, the minister's been talking that for years about improving the ease of doing business, and it is still where it is, dropping, down now at rank 105. This is administration. See us now at this low level for the ease of doing business, when under my watch we had increased, improved the ease of doing business. You have brought us to this pass. We saw the digital process as a cornerstone of human development and talent management. Our administration of 10 to 15 made considerable strides in creating sustainable development through an innovation-led and knowledge-driven economy. We established a single electronic window years ago. We knew a decade ago that a technologically driven economy was necessary. We were moving to deal with the retraining of officers, modernizing certain legislation and regulatory framework, and for standardization of equipment. You know, the Couva Hospital, the Children's Hospital, we were on the way to creating the first digital hospital in the Caribbean for medical tourism. Of the spite and bad mind, this government never opened the hospital. It took a pandemic to open that hospital for use. All the records of a patient's medication, health condition, supervision stored on a barcoded wristband to be shared with all health providers and institutions on an electronically secured platform. That is what was to be started there to encourage medical tourism. So don't tell me we didn't try to diversify the economy. We work with respect to medical tourism. We work with respect to sport tourism when we built all those sports centers everywhere. Education tourism when we built that campus down in South, so more people could come from the Caribbean. These were some of the areas for diversification. So don't come and tell me you did nothing for diversification. You probably don't understand what it means. You don't understand what it means. So here we are. Minister did not acknowledge the critical need to partner with the private sector with this digital economy. Like a heady child with a toy, he couldn't be bothered with relevant details. But you know the truth is, this government, in its previous term, they put together some digital projects, most of which have failed. There were 24 associated projects worth a total of about $270 million to improve IT infrastructure in the police service. These projects were due to begin 16 and 17 fiscal. They collapsed, PNM style. Then $8 million was allocated to telecom companies for the provision of broadband Wi-Fi services along Brian Lara, Promenade, and elsewhere. 2017, a total of $15 million for strengthening the single electronic window. As with the previous undertakings, that too failed. 2019, government again put another $30 million to the single electronic window. Excuse me. An IDB loan was then sourced for a $26 million project for institutional strengthening in the Registrar General's Department. That venture was meant to simplify the process of property registration and improve conditions for investments in the country. You could guess what became of that project also. It gets worse because 2 years later, a further $13 million was allocated to the very same project. And then in 2019, a further $30 million was assigned for procurement and consultancies and equipment for the exact same project at the Registrar General's Department. So what's happening? You talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk. You have an implementation deficit. You have a delivery deficit. So you have been talking about these things, but it's not happening. It's not happening. My colleague from MP from Mayaro will deal a little more with these projects in the digitalization aspects of the economy. So, it's a new buzzword. The sound as though something is going to happen, when for 5 years you pump money into these things to grow a digital economy, and it just never happened. New buzzword. That's the new buzzword. Here we will see again. A lot of these things before COVID. Tell me what will help you to make it happen during COVID now, in this 2021 budget that you have delivered and the policy prescriptions that you have made. Again, it is very difficult to believe that these things will happen again. I agree that is the way to go for the digital economy. I've been talking about for years. And I talk about the fourth industrial revolution. I've been talking about this for years. We began on that journey when we gave all the laptops and we dealt with certain other things in ICT. That same Registrar General project, when I was Legal Affairs Minister years ago, we had started that putting the records, companies registry, lands registry, and so on, civil registry onto computerized databases and so on. Some of these things that we are talking about now started back then. I don't know what has happened to them. Maybe the Attorney General will tell us about it. Finally, before I go into my closing remarks, I had said, and I repeat, that this budget is a budget of recycled, broken promises. Recycled, broken promises. I will just give a few recycled, broken promises. That is why I say they are promises made before COVID. They have been broken, and therefore I have no reason to believe that it's going to be any different with the same PNM government at the helm. You have failed miserably for 5 years. Government still has the goal and temerity to stand here and claim achievements. Achievements, in that Red Book budget statement. Achievements which have not materialized. Can you be so bold-faced to claim achievements that have not been achieved? Who are we fooling? Whom are we fooling? If someone really doesn't take the time to read it, they'll go there and say the budget ain't so bad, But when you get into the details, we see that they are giving a false narrative to the population, a false sense of feel-good, because their delivery, broken promises, PNM promises never materialize up to today. The reconstruction of the central block of the Port of Spain General Hospital to date remains incomplete, but we are told that is an achievement. The Valencia-Toco Highway is still in the planning and design phase. Yet you put that as an achievement. It's an achievement. And the ferry port in Toco, you put that as an achievement. There is no ferry and there is no port. How can it be an achievement? And by the way, you tell us you want to privatize the port of Port of Spain. Why are you telling us now you're promising to build a port in Toco? Why? You say one port, you cannot run it, let's privatize it. But you're going to build one in Toco. Is that making sense? Doesn't seem to be making any sense at all. So a ferry port in Toco is an achievement. No ferry, no port. You talk about 1,700 housing units that were supposed to be built. You didn't build them. The former Minister of Housing will talk more about that. You didn't build them. But you put that as an achievement. Furthest from the truth. You talk about a highway extension to Point 14. We started that highway 5 years now. You're claiming this as an achievement. And it is still not complete. And I'm talking, these are also repeated promises. Each budget, these projects, have been repeated. The San Fernando Waterfront Project. Achievement. You know what's happening right now? They're digging the dirt by the cemetery. But that's an achievement. That's the achievement. Dry dock and shipbuilding facility at La Brea. Achievement. Can you believe dry dock and shipbuilding at La Brea? We signed this agreement in 2014. Up to now, they say they are conceptualizing this facility. Achievement. They're conceptualizing. The Tobago Airport. Achievement. When, as far as I read, it's only recently some money was approved to pay for land. So these are not achievements. These are not achievements. It is clear that the government has failed miserably to accomplish anything meaningful after 5 years in government. They are reduced to claiming broken promises, pie-in-the-sky plans, still in just starting phase or not started at all. They claim them as achievements. We know that the PNM really means promises never materialize. We know that you have an unsavory history of broken promises on key issues. For example, when a government so selected inter-island vessels at a value of more than $1 billion, it has been vainly promising since 2016 budget to introduce a fair, transparent procurement system. 5 years later, we are still waiting. Every budget we are told, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Procurement. In the meantime, dished out taxpayers' money in contracts worth billions of dollars. The National Statistical Institute, another promise, repeat, repeat, repeat. In the meantime, government uses stale-dated figures from the CSO, none at all, to suit their agenda. While hundreds of thousands of workers have lost their jobs, the minister says with a straight face, the unemployment rate is 4%. You hear that untruth? Thousands, and they're telling us it's 4%. Nobody's fooled, because anybody who's outside of the bubble that you are in will see the job losses, will see it everywhere throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. That is an untruth. But you put out no statistics, you just make up this figure from out of a hat. If you can get the statistics from a veritable source that we can give credibility to, bring it. Then we'll believe you. We'll just come and pull that out of a hat. 4% unemployment, when and where? Not in Trinidad and Tobago. You are living in a different world. Again, I talk about agriculture, repeats. Last Monday's assurances to double output, raise contribution of the sector. We've heard all of that before, broken. Then there are promises with respect to manufacturing, which have also played out in each budget, in like a popular road march, playing out in every budget. Since 2017, you have been pledging to boost the non-energy sector, to establish special economic zones. All these things are not new. So what in heaven's name in this budget is there to, what was the word? The economy, to reset the economy. To reset what? All these things you've promised, and you have not implemented. What is there to reset the economy for growth? You speak of a menu of infrastructural projects, of plans to incentivize the sector. The traffic woes have only worsened. Again, my colleagues will go into more details of that. Public utilities, you've been promising for years that both WASA and TNTEC would become more efficient. Lo and behold, back again, repeat, to be broken again. Last year you said we are working assiduously to improve the distribution of water to all segments. The reality is that the people of TNT have, in recent months, gone through some of the worst water shortages in recent memory. I talked about illegal migrants already stepping ashore. The minister said that work is far advanced on establishing a joint border patrol agency. My God, that was a promise from the Manifesto 2015, and every single year thereafter, and now you're talking about that again. Joint border patrol agency. I mean, how can you, just say it's insanity to do the same things over and over and over again and expect a different result. It's the same broken promises. For years, promising renewable projects, promising negotiations with the oil and gas companies, promising plans to upstream production, repeated promises on Tobago, provision of ICT connectivity, police service, and so much more. Promises, it is said. Promises, it is said, is gold to a fool, gold to a fool. With multiple failed promises over the years, this government has not critically examined and repaired their poor record of implementation. It could only mean that they think very little of the community nationally. They continue to shoot off these fool gold promises. Today, as I close, I say, the UNC is committed. The UNC is the only party that produced a comprehensive economic plan. Our economic master transformation plan is detailed, and I want to encourage you to go to our website, www.uncplan2020.com, and take a look. The prescriptions that I've given you here, I've given some suggestions, but the actual master plan can be seen and can be read. It is there for anyone who wishes to see. So don't come and tell me I didn't give you any suggestions. I have an entire plan, which I shared with the nation, which we have in it. We have the 7 boosters, COVID boosters. We have the 12 prosperity engine drivers and all the other elements of that master plan. The UNC believes in equality. We believe in investing in children. We believe education is a passport out of poverty. We believe that small and medium-sized businesses are the backbone of our economy and they need help to grow. We believe that our nation needs a clear and comprehensive national security policy. We believe in secure borders. And we say the UNC is still here and remains the only hope for Trinidad and Tobago. Our economy and democracy continue to be under threat by this regime. People are looking to the UNC to defend our Constitution and freedoms. The UNC is the only party which represents the needs of the middle class and the working poor. We continue to advocate policies to promote social mobility and aspiration. Our nation's future is under peril. We know that it's only set to get worse, even as the Prime Minister himself admitted on election night, to get worse. The budget appears designed to punish the vast majority of our citizens, whom he chastised at the start, but will affect every man, woman, and child. The opposition, as is our duty, will continue to push for greater transparency and accountability from government. We will continue to put forward plans and suggestions designed to develop and uplift all citizens of our nation. I say on a personal note, I will not stop fighting. I have stood many times in this Parliament to defend the rights, liberties, as well as welfare of our citizens, not only because of my elected duty, but because of my love and dedication for a beautiful country. Many years ago, when I entered these hallowed halls, my aim was to ensure equality, justice, and equitable development. My goal has always been the development of a nation where the children of janitors or of taxi drivers have the same opportunity as those of lawyers and doctors. Indeed, one of my MPs is the son of a taxi driver, and he has educated himself. He sits now in this chamber. My passion has always been no child must be left behind. My passion has always been the creation of a society where one is not judged based on appearance, race, religion, economic background, gender, or even political support. We must be all able to achieve our true potential and be given the opportunities to do so. Today I stand at a time when our greatest asset, our citizens, are under attack from a misguided, incompetent, uncaring, and incompetent, intellectually bankrupt administration. There has never been a more uncertain time in our nation's history, with the suffering, burdens, and hardship of so many increasing by the day. That is why I stand more determined as ever to battle for the betterment of people. I repeat, COVID did not crash the economy. That government crashed the economy. Our trouble started long before COVID. There was no bold COVID stimulus package to jolt the sluggish and stalled economy into gear from this budget. There was no bold announcement of foreign direct investment to create wealth and prosperity. There was no investment strategy to get TNT working again. Their wisdom ends with raising the price of apple, grapes, cars, and gas. If they could not do it before 2020, I'm saying they cannot do it after. If they couldn't do it before COVID to grow this economy, stabilize this economy, they cannot do it during COVID and after. What we saw in Monday's budget was a government that has given up on the people of our nation. In the opposition, we say we will never give up, and we have not given up on them. We will not and never stop believing in the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We believe in the talent, the skills, and dynamic ability of every citizen. And that is why we put this government on notice. We will not allow you to burden our citizens, crippling their true ability. We will not allow you to neglect citizens, depriving them the opportunity to achieve their dreams, as you have done for 5 years. We will not allow you to endanger the future of our children, who face very grim days. We will not allow you to derail our democracy, as you have done. I tell all citizens, we will not, in the opposition, we will not stop fighting for you. As we enter the new normal, we will ensure that our citizens are placed before politics. Government has failed citizens with this budget. It is clear that their budget policies means more hardship. But the opposition I lead will utilize these hallowed halls to ensure that our country develops into a nation which serves, protects, and enriches all who call these islands home. We will do our part to ensure that our citizens can live, thrive, and be given equal opportunities. As a nation, it is now that we must rediscover our purpose. We must return to those qualities of nationhood. We will be resilient, courageous, vigilant, and keep faith that a better day will come. This is still our time to shine as an opposition, as a people, and as a nation. This is also still a time for a government to shine. We will bring hope where there is despair. I want to say, may God continue to bless our great nation. And I thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West.
That was a live broadcast of the response by the Leader of the Opposition, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, in the House of Representatives to Monday's presentation of the 2020-2021 budget by Minister of Finance, Com Impert. Remember to stay tuned to TTT Talk City 91.1 FM and TTT Live Online for your latest news updates.